was at a party for CAA, my agency, and Stan Lee is also represented by CAA. And he's on the other side of the room. His agent came over to me and said, "Would you like to meet Stan?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." And so she takes me over to meet Stan Lee, and as a kid growing up, I started reading comics because you guys remember back in the day on the Electric Company, they used to have terrible live-action Spider-Man, which was awesome at like age 6. And so they had live-action Spider-Man that Stan Lee would narrate. And out of watching these things on Electric Company, I said to my mom, I said, I want to start reading those comics. And so I started reading Spider-Man, I started reading the X-Men, started reading the Avengers, Thor, all the way down the line. And so I said, so when I went and met Stan, I said, you gotta understand, as a kid, your comics changed my life. Like, you reading your comics made me want to tell my own stories, made me want to write my own stories. Like, they gave me the courage to want to be this creative, weird kid. And I said, you have no idea what that means. I just want to say thank you. And he goes, oh, Morgan, that's so nice of you to say thank you. It's nice to meet you. We should make a movie together. We should make a documentary. We should make a documentary about Comic-Con. I was like, that's a great idea, Mr. Lee. And I shook his hand, I literally turned around, and Peter Michelli, who's a big giant agent at CAA, said, he goes, how was it meeting Stan? I said, it was amazing. I said, we want to make a movie about Comic-Con. He goes, you should meet my other client who's coming into town tomorrow. Cut to tomorrow, as I was having breakfast with Joss Whedon, his other client. It's crazy. And then I called my friend Mark Whitelarde, who is on the board of directors of Comic-Con. I said, where are you? I got out of breakfast, I said, where are you? Right now. And so I tracked him down. I told him about meeting Stan, told him about meeting Joss. By that point, we kind of flushed out what a film would actually be. I told him, I said, we want to make a film at Comic-Con here next year. And he worked for Comic-Con for about 25 years at that point. He said, every year, someone has come to us wanting to make a movie like this. And we've always said no. But this time, it just might be. What's happening now in comics is what happened in filmmaking a few years ago. There was a massive democratization of cinema that happened when suddenly prosumer cameras got high enough quality that it could support a local 35 millimeter, and then anyone with a camera and a computer and a good idea could make a movie. That's what enabled us to make Super Size Me, and I think that's what enabled so many great young indie filmmakers, the whole mumblecore movement, to come out of kind of that transition. What's happening now with comics is there's this ability now for anyone who can write a good story, who can draw amazing characters, to put out a digital comic for next to nothing. Whereas before, the barrier of entry to get a print, to get a publisher, it's going to cost you thousands and thousands of dollars. Now you're going to see great independent writers, directors, artists come out of this that you've never seen before. And I think that's exciting. As an independent filmmaker, the idea that there's going to be a real great independent art movement come out of this is real. And I think that's what we need to be looking at. It's not this question of like nostalgic of, oh my gosh, I'm not going to have my paper comics anymore. Those will still get printed. I really believe that what will happen now with those comics is they will become true collectibles. Now what they will do is they'll print a run of 500. They'll be numbered. They'll all be signed. So it literally will become this collectible thing that you put right into a case and you won't want to really touch. They will become a very specialized market for true collectors. But I think when it comes down to comics, it's going to be this great, inventive, creative period for independent artists and writers. Yes? Who's my favorite superhero? See, I wanted to be someone really cool, but as a kid, I fell in love with Plastic Man. Plastic Man is my favorite superhero, which is weird, but I don't mind. Yes, sir.
Every year it gets harder and harder to buy tickets.
Yes.
What do you think is the future of Comic-Con in, say, 10 years?
I tell you what I think the future of Comic-Con is going to be in less than 10 years. I think Comic-Con will start doing what TED does. I think that what you're going to see, if any of you have gone to TED.com and watched any of the TED Talks, I think you'll pay, people all across the country, you'll be able to pay $50 and stay at home. You'll be able to watch any of the panels that happen during Comic-Con from home. Because here's the thing, tickets to Comic-Con sell out like this. It's like a rock concert. It's like Bonnaroo. Like literally 150,000 tickets sell out in less than 2 hours. And not only tickets for people to go, but even vendors. Like vendors can't even get space. There's certain people who are guaranteed space, and other people have to go into a lottery to try and get space. And even that sells out. Part of the deal with them staying in San Diego and making the deal to stay in San Diego, it's also this thing. People were texting me when the movie was coming out, like, did you talk about how there's no hotels either? Because now the hotel rooms, there's not enough hotel space. So now the deal with them to stay was they have to build more hotels in San Diego, they have to expand the convention center, so these things are going to happen, but there's such an audience of people who can't go, who want to see these things, and I think that they will turn it into an interactive conference. I think it will become much more interactive with people at home. I think that's because they think there's a real market that they haven't even tapped into yet. Yes?
You think they'll move to Vegas, though, because of that?
Do I think they'll move to
There was
Vegas?
a threat that they were going to do
I
it.
think there was a threat they were going to move to Vegas, there was a threat they were going to move to Anaheim. I don't think they'll ever move. I think San Diego realizes they have something fantastic there that is incredibly unique and special to San Diego. It brings in like $150 million of economic impact every year when that thing happens of people who come to town. Like the idea of San Diego losing that, businesses losing that, I think they would never want that to happen. So I think San Diego will do everything it can every year. The deal they signed, I think, was for another, I don't know if it was 5 years or 10 years, but it was five, so it was another, that's a good extension. And that's a lot of time for them to do quite a bit to keep it there. Yeah. Yes, sir.
How do you write a documentary?
How do you write a documentary? Whenever I come up with any film, any idea, whatever it may be, it's me and my writing partner, Jeremy Chilling, we sit down and we say, in a perfect world, in a perfect world, if we all had rainbows and unicorns, what would happen in this movie? And so you write out, here's what the film would be in a perfect world. And then you start shooting on day one, and that gets thrown out the window, because none of the stuff that's in there ever happens. But at least you have a roadmap, something to start from. And then as you go into the editorial process, and you start putting the film together, you start writing the story. You start writing, how am I going to marry Skip's story to Holly's story? How am I going to marry Chuck's story to this person's story? So you literally do start marrying these people's thoughts and ideas together in a script form while you're editing the film. So you are basically weaving the story together, writing it as you're editing it, usually with your editorial team. So that's what happens. Yes?
First off, you're the man.
Thank you.
Second of all,
You're a very handsome man.
what inspired you to start making movies, and when was that?
What inspired me to start making movies? Ever since I was a kid, all I ever wanted to do was make films. I had a family who was incredibly supportive of the arts. Where I grew up in West Virginia, I was the youngest of 3 ballet dancing brothers, which was not the cool thing to be in West Virginia at all. It was probably the least cool thing you could be in West Virginia. But my parents were just amazing. We would see movies all the time. My mom she'd always write poetry and short stories. There was always music playing in the house. She was just this incredibly inspired, creative person who just wanted us to be whatever we wanted. And so from a young age, I just loved films. I loved movies. And when I went to see, and my parents took me to see things you would never take kids to see in movies today. Like, I saw Jaws in a movie theater like age 6, and The Exorcist, and they did the re-release at like age 8. Like, terrible things. No kid should ever go see that at like age 8. 10 maybe, but not 8. And I like Scanners. I went to see Scanners, the David Cronenberg film, in the movie theater. When Michael Ironside made that guy's head explode, that changed my life forever. Like, that was the moment where I said, whatever that is, I want to do that. And originally I wanted to be like Tom Savini. I wanted to be Rick Baker. I wanted to do makeup special effects. Like, that's ultimately what I wanted to do. And then when I learned you could actually go to college to learn how to make movies, that's where I said, oh, well, then I want to go learn the craft of making films. And I went to film school and kind of been on the track ever since. Yes?
Well, I was wondering, is there a documentary subject that you're interested in doing or that you're waiting for the right time to do?
Is there something that I'm interested in that I'm waiting for the right time? I mean, we get ideas all the time. I got a 5-year-old, my little boy, he's in public school right now. And I went to public school. I'm all for public school. I'm having a bit of an issue with my public school, as most people in the world are, and most people in America, because of just the way public schools function. And, for me, it's like I would love to do something about the education system. My good friend Dave Guggenheim did an amazing film last year called Waiting for Superman. I thought it was a great look at how education. If you guys haven't seen that film, it's an amazing movie. But for me, I think that there's still more to talk about with education, about what should be done. So, I mean, at some point, I guess my frustration will have to reach a greater level. And to kind of be like, I have to do this right now. But I would love to do something about the U.S. education system. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Could you describe a little logistics of shooting this? Was it a lot of crews?
Yeah.
Equipment, really digital or active footage?
Yeah, no, the crew shooting this film was massive. We had a crew of about 150 people working on this movie. We had 15 full camera crews. We had 10 crews that were following around our characters. We had another 5 crews that were set up on the celebrity sites, as well as bouncing around to panels, to signings, to different things all day long. We shot most of the film on EX3s and EX1s, which are much more manageable digital cameras. We tested a lot of cameras, and we wanted something that would be a little more navigable in the field. So within each of those crews, the second cameraman or the field producer would have the ability to also pick up a camera and start shooting if we wanted cross coverage or if we needed him to peel off and shoot something else. So over the course of shooting, we would be rolling anywhere between like 15 and 25 cameras at any given moment, during the con. And we ended up shooting about 450 hours of footage total. I mean, when all was said and done. So it was massive. Every night we would come in, we'd be downloading the footage all day long, putting it into the systems, basically backing it up all day long, backing up the backups of what we've been backing up. We go in, after like 16, 17-hour day, myself and my two producers, Matthew Galvin and Jeremy Chilnick, would sit and we would scan footage about the next 3 hours. And we would just scan through everything we've shot, see where our storylines with characters, see what was happening, see if we hit certain beats that we thought we were going to get, and then make our kind of shot list and our plans for the next day. And then we usually go to bed around 2, wake up around 6, and start all over again. Yes, sir.
You described your filmmaking process, and I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about how you got those stories to connect to one another. And create. So, like, what would the story of Comic-Con be? Put it that way.
I mean, for me, the story of Comic-Con is a story about passion. It's a story about people who are passionate about things. Whatever that thing may be. That thing may be, costume design. That thing may be, character art. That thing may be an 18-inch Galactus. Whatever. But whatever it is, you are passionate about something so much. And here is a room filled of 150,000 of your closest friends who all kind of share that same type of passion. Maybe directed in a different way, but it's driven by that same kind of love for whatever X is. When we started editing the film, we broke out all of our character storylines in one and we edited them all linearly. So basically we edited Holly's story as one straight story, Skip's, Eric's, as one straight story. We broke out all of the celebrity sites, all the fan site, B-roll into another bin, different B-roll based on different days. In the celebrity site, using our fan site, you start breaking everything up by sections, like what was your Comic-Con experience? What do you remember? Why did people come here? Whatever those ideas may be. And then you start with, the setup of each of our people, each of our characters, and just weaving those in through our introductions to them, through key moments that'll take us into someone else's story, and you start chopping it down. You come to an assembly edit, we usually come to a first assembly after about like 4 or 5 months. And we had our first assembly done, and we had, I guess it was at about 3 hours at that point, maybe a little over 3 hours. From there you start trimming down what's important, what's not. You go from 3.5 to 3, 3 to 2.5, 2.5 to 2. Once you reach 2 hours, when it gets really, really difficult, because that's when literally it's filled with stuff you all love. Your editors, my co-producers, like that's when it gets really difficult. You have to make tough decisions. And we really wanted the film to be about 90 minutes. I think that's a real sweet spot for documentaries. I think it's, you really have a hard time, I think, losing an audience in that time. I think and you can keep a great pace. So we were really trying to chop it down to 90, and it was, and it just gets difficult. But I think that we pulled a storyline out of the film. That was the other thing that I think made a big difference for us. There was a couple, a husband and a wife, that we followed from Colombia, South America. And his dream was to start a comic book company ever since he was a kid. And so they mortgaged their house, they launched this comic book. It was a story, it was basically a folklore tale about this slave who was risen up against his captors, basically freed all his people, and was now fighting against the ills of society. And it's a folk story, much like, John Henry or something, but it's, so it was very popular within this community. And he said, for me to really make this be a success, I've got to get somebody to help me break my stories out to the larger Latino market. We've got to go to Comic-Con. So they entered the lottery, they ended up getting a booth, they borrowed some money from his mom to pay for the stuff they were going to put in the booth. They were getting ready to go, 2 weeks out, they're a week out, her visa comes, they're preparing and putting it together, what are we going to do? The day comes, they're going to leave town, and his visa never came. So he can't leave. So basically, he puts her on a plane, she flies to San Diego, she doesn't know what she's doing, she has nobody to talk to. It's like, it's not her dream, it's not her passion. So like, he's Skyping with her every night, she's talking to him, trying to figure out who should I talk to, what should I do? And she's wandering around, and it was so difficult. And for us to tell that story in the film would have us required to suddenly have to put in a voiceover. Because like, there were so many things to like explain to you what was happening, here's what's going on. For you to know that, we would have had to have told basically, here's the story, here's what's going on. We have to set it up through voiceover and carry that voiceover throughout. And I made the conscious decision early on that I didn't want this to be driven by a voiceover. I wanted to kind of have its own catalyst for moving the story along. And we made the decision, as we were in post, after we were about like 2+ hours, I said, we should pull that story out. And it made a huge difference. Like the movie flowed differently, everything paced differently, it just worked. So that story will probably end up being on the DVD. But it was a tough question. Yes. What was the hardest part about making the film? There's so much to cover at Comic-Con. There's so much to do. There's so many things. The hardest part is just deciding what you're going to shoot. Like, what are the things you're going to pick? Where are you going to go? You know, with the 150 people that we made and the story we told, with that same crew and that same con, I could have made, you know, 25 different movies. You know, we could have cast completely different people and had a completely different arc and a completely different outlook. So, you know, as a filmmaker, you make a choice and you say, here's what we're going to do. And for me, the film of these characters, it's about stakes. You know, and so each one of our characters, Holly Conrad was the very first person we cast, and we used her as kind of the litmus test for everyone else. Is like, why are these people going? What are their stakes? What do they hope to accomplish? And it's whether it's, you know, I'm trying to find my career, or I'm trying to break into this business, or I'm trying to save my business like Chuck. You know, or it's like, I've got to get my doll. I've got an action figure. Sorry, I've got to get my 18-inch Galactus. I've got to get that. Like he's on a real mission. If he doesn't get it, he's going to be incomplete as a human being. You know, Anthony Calderon needs that. Or you're a guy who's like, you know, going there to try and get the woman you love to spend the rest of your life with you. Like those are real, beautiful stakes and stories. And for me, you know, we wanted to make sure we found people who had that as a real narrative and as a real arc. And I think that's what makes the story ultimately human. The film does a great job of humanizing everybody that's in this film. And my prediction moving forward is this film will be the new I'm okay, you're okay for the 21st century. I predict geeks all across the country giving this film to their parents for Christmas saying, look mom, I'm normal, watch this. And it's gonna be great. And there will be geek epiphanies all across the country. Suddenly people are gonna, you know, whip out their lightsabers and be like, look dude, it's totally cool now. And it's gonna be great. Thank you guys for coming, I appreciate it.